Vamos a comenzar dándole la palabra por 20 minutos a Larry Kuehn. Vale la pena que los maestras y maestros que nos acompañan en este webinario conozcan algo de la amplia trayectoria de Larry. Es doctor en educación, maestro en educación en Reed College, en Oregon. Fue director de investigación de la Federación de Maestros de la Columbia Británica por 40 años, desde 1979 hasta el año anterior, 2019, en que se retiró. En el 2018 fue ganador del premio G.A. Ferguson, el más alto honor dentro de la Federación de Profesores de la Columbia Británica. Comenzó su carrera docente en Pitman en 1968. Se convirtió miembro del Ejecutivo de la Federación de Maestros de la Columbia Británica en 1977 y fue presidente de esa federación desde 1981 a 1984. Con este antecedente, que solamente refleja parte de la rica vida docente de Larry, queremos darle la bienvenida y la palabra para que se dirija a todos nosotros. Bienvenido, Larry.
Hey, thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry it takes so long to get this going here. I want to thank the IDEA Network and Red SEPA for organizing this. I think that this is a time where it's absolutely essential that we look at what's behind what's going on in terms of the impact of education on education in the current context. Certainly there's a very high value of the technology in the pandemic, demonstrated by what we're seeing today in the fact that we're using Zoom to have this session, and that many families are connecting and many teachers and students are connecting by technology, and not just Zoom but many others as well. However, the extensive use of the technology also increases the vulnerability to the monopoly corporations that control much of the technology. And those monopolies have developed over a period of time because of the nature of our economy. So it's important for us to understand the nature of this corporate control if we're going to identify the ways that we can counter that control. The system as it's operating now has been described in her book by Shoshana Zuboff as surveillance capitalism. The key elements that she describes in surveillance capitalism have to do with data as the key resource. Some have described it as the oil of the digital age. It's the most important resource for the nature of capitalism.
Larry, can you take a bit of a pause for a sec?
Sure. So we are the data. Everything we do online is captured as data. And that data is, as I say, it's the key resource in digital capital. And the control of the platforms in which we operate are in the hands of a small number of the largest global corporations. Those I think everybody is aware of, but I'll name them: Google or Alphabet, which is the company that owns Google and many other things, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook. And now Zoom has become a major platform as well. It went from 10 million users before the pandemic to hundreds of millions of users now. And there's a recent report that says that Zoom has been selling its data to Google. So it takes one platform and combines the data, the core resource, and shares it with the largest of the data users. And Zuboff describes how the corporations, because of the nature of property and capital, they declare the rights to the data as property. This is data that describes our human experience, but it belongs to them when we agree to their terms of service and use their service. So it's appropriating our data as an own property. They can then use the data in any way they see fit, including to influence our future behavior. And that's, of course, exactly how the data was used in the US election in 2016, and the way in which we're manipulated in terms of consumption as well as political participation. And the third main feature is that they can claim economic value that's created by the use of our data without compensating us. And that's where the real value is in all of this. And when we think that we're getting a free service, in fact, what we're doing is we're providing our data to the company, which can use it for all of the economic value. So platform capitalism is colonizing education as well as all other aspects of our lives. I've mentioned that there's several corporations. I'm going to talk specifically about one of them, the one that probably is having the most impact on education, and that's Google. And identify 4 areas where it is getting the data used in education that it can then use for its own development of more applications and for advertising, etc. Google Classroom is a classroom management system that's being used by hundreds of millions of students and teachers globally. It is a massive collector of information as students provide resources, teachers provide assignments, the examinations are given on it, grades are provided through it, etc. So it's a massive data collection system. Google Search, of course, is used by teachers to find resources. In a survey of BC teachers a couple of years ago, they identified Google as the most important source that they went to find resources for their teaching. And it has a bias of algorithms that will lead to particular kinds of things and place others very low on the search resource. Of course, Google Search is used extensively by students as well. Again, providing information about the users and providing the kind of big data that Google uses for its artificial intelligence. Google Meet is an online conferencing system similar to Zoom and has been developed, had new features added to it to try to challenge Zoom, and again to be a source of collection of data. Although, as I mentioned, Zoom it's been reported as supplies data to Google as well. And YouTube is the most used source by students in online learning. And it's also owned by Alphabet Google. There was a survey that was done a couple of weeks ago in the US looking at the most used resources, and YouTube was at the top. And that fits with what I understand is the experience of teachers here in British Columbia who are extensively using YouTube, both for their own lectures or lessons and as resources for students to look at. The second most used feature in the US is something called clever.com. I hadn't heard about it before and had to look it up. And the claim is that about 60% of schools in the United States use clever.com as an aggregator or platform. The way it's used is that school districts have it as the access point for students to come into their own school district sites, to school sites, to classroom sites, as well as into applications into Google and other sources as well. An equivalent in Canada and probably elsewhere is that some school districts use their own websites as a way of linking the various resources that they want students to use, and to connect with whatever the tools they're using for managing classroom activities. All of these raise issues of surveillance of students and teachers through tracking their use of the various services. And it's in addition to the kind of surveillance that's done by the technology corporation, it's a kind of surveillance that can be done by the school district in the school and the teacher of exactly what the students are doing, and raises serious questions, I think, of privacy, and has been described by some as a case of surveillance creep as we accept more and more of these kinds of things. So what are the key issues in all of this? One of the key ideas, I think, is that technology is not neutral. We sometimes hear people say, well, it's just a matter of what you do with it. It's not the technology itself that's the issue, that the technology is neutral and it's up to the user then. But that simply isn't the case. That there is a monopoly that the industry is concentrated, as I've said, into a handful of corporations. And they've developed their monopoly through two processes. One is to be the first to get there, to develop a service and build the user base on that, which then makes it very hard for any other company to come in and challenge them. And then as they develop their monopoly and have more and more resources, they buy out the competition, or they buy all of the other related kinds of resources. And so it becomes more and more concentrated. And we see that the most valuable corporations in the world now are a handful of corporations that are in the technology area. So monopoly is as Dr. O has said, the industry's concentration means that it can control who speaks and who hears what they say. So it's not neutral. It actually is handing over power to the corporations to make those determinations. The second key issue is equity. The levels of access that vary according to social class, income, and geography. We already live in a world that we know is becoming increasingly inequitable. And the COVID crisis and the use of technology is simply increasing that inequity, and is something that we have to address in education, especially because education should be the key tool to allow some kind of equity. And the levels of access to the technology in this context are a key problem. And there's privacy and surveillance. Privacy is key to personal autonomy, and it's threatened in many ways, both through the surveillance that we have through the technology in the classroom, and the larger surveillance and lack of privacy in the larger context as well. And fourth, every tool shapes the task. That the tool itself, it helps to determine, places parameters about what can be done and what can't be done. And the technology we use is influencing or determining our pedagogy as we develop the tools that we're using online. And this is an area that we have to do research on to understand what the impact is, how these tools, whether it's Zoom or Google or whatever tools we're using, are shaping our pedagogical practice. So what should be done? First of all, we have to have regulation. That we can't simply allow all of these important social decisions to be made by monopoly capital. And it's really only governments that have the capacity to regulate when things become so large and where individual activity is not sufficient. Sometimes people say, well, we should boycott Google or we should boycott Facebook. But individual boycotts are not enough to have an impact. We really have to use the power of government and consider breaking up these monopolies. There have been calls specifically around Amazon recently because of the massive degree to which it controls both the internet, through its web services and commercial activities that leave it to determine so many elements of our economy and society, and that we have to ask governments to look at placing controls there. The second thing we need to do is research. We can't get the control for social purposes unless we understand the impact. And we need to understand that impact on education in particular. And it's very early in the process of using these technologies, and teachers and students, all over the world have been, for the last 3 or 4 months, been using technology to replace their classroom practice and experimenting and trying things out. And we need to understand what the impact of these are. We need to understand what works effectively, what they're, how they can be made to work for everybody. So research is, and we have to address equity. We have to ensure universal access to the tools and make internet a public utility available at low cost to all globally. Again, half the world has access to the internet, and only a part of that to the high-speed internet that you really need to use these technologies effectively in education. And at the very least, we have to insist our governments, and governments everywhere can do this, is to make the internet a public utility, much like the post office is in most countries, where there is one price that is paid regardless of where you are and who you are, that gives some equity to being able to use a service. And it's absolutely essential that this happen with the internet as well. And finally, we have to demand privacy rights. We have to limit corporate rights to our data and guarantee what's been called the right to be forgotten. We have to be able to have some control over how our data is used, and to have access to say that we have the right to have things taken off the internet, as has happened in Europe, in the European Union, which has produced this right to be forgotten. That needs to be expanded substantially as well. So that's, I think, a lot of challenges for us. There is an article that's been translated into Spanish, and it's up on English as well on the IDEA website that goes into some of the details of this further than this. And I look forward to the discussion and the questions on these issues. Thank you.